Welcome back, you guys! I think this is a good week to start out with a little recap. In our pursuit of trying to make sense of the current COVID-19 pandemic, we have been taking a look at some historical pandemics. We looked at the Black Death during the Middle Ages and tried to make sense of how people react when they feel like they're out of control. Last week, we looked at smallpox and focused on how it went from being one of the most deadly, history-defining diseases to being virtually eradicated by new science in the form of vaccines. Hopefully, by looking at those steps to create a new vaccine, it helps us put into perspective just how much time and work goes into something like that. It's not unusual for that whole process to take multiple decades. This week, we're going to take an in-depth look at our third and final historical pandemic, the Great Influenza Outbreak of 1918, most commonly known as the Spanish flu. Really quick, let's check out our unit overview. I am going to make a slight change to this. Instead of looking at what the government's role is during a pandemic, I think it would almost be more meaningful to hear from some survivors of that pandemic. What was their life like? What was the vibe like in the world in 1918? The generation of people that lived through the Spanish flu arguably lived during one of the hardest times to be alive in history. The Spanish flu struck right towards the end of World War I, so it was not exactly a great time to be alive, just as it was. Just imagine being a soldier during World War I, fighting in the trenches, running across open fields, being fired on by these new technologies like the machine gun and armored tanks, only to return to your bunker after battle to find that your regiment had been struck by the Spanish flu. It's interesting to think that 3 times as many people died during this time from the Spanish flu than they did in a world war. And the truth is, Spanish influenza is just the flu. It was just a particularly deadly strain. In fact, I'm sure most, if not all of us, have had the flu at some point. Spanish flu struck when people did understand what a virus was and how it spreads. It's therefore probably the most comparable thing to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're living in right now. But don't take my word for it. Your assignment this week is to hear from the survivors themselves. The final historical pandemic we're going to take an in-depth look at is the Spanish influenza of 1918. This virus swept around the world about 100 years ago during the First World War and killed more people than the war itself. Your assignment this week is to read a short secondary source about the Spanish flu and then hear some first-hand accounts from people who survived it. Links to 3 survivor interviews are attached below. Watch the interviews and complete the chart on your Google Doc assignment. Follow these steps to complete this assignment. Number 1, watch Mr. Thompson's update. Number 2, read the source titled The Spanish Flu of 1918. This is a pretty short source, but I think it's good, and I think it has some good pictures too. Number 3, open the Google Doc titled Comparing Experiences from 1918. This is your assignment, and this is what you'll be turning in at the end of the week. For each survivor that you hear from, I would like you to record their name, which is given at the start of each video, 3 details from their experience, and finally, talk about what similarities have you seen lately between their experiences and what is reported in the news today. Number 4, watch the 3 short interviews with Spanish flu survivors linked below. So these are interviews with 3 women in their 90s who lived in Alabama during the time of the Spanish flu. Why no men, you ask? Well, it's because women tend to live longer than men. Hard truths, boys. Stay healthy. Number 5, complete the Google Doc and submit your work by clicking the Turn In button at the top. Hopefully by this point, you've been in online school for about a month now. You should be getting a hang of setting aside time dedicated to completing your assignments. With that in mind, you will have to set aside probably about an hour for this assignment this week. A half an hour to read your source, and a half an hour to listen to the interviews and respond on your Google Doc. There you have it, guys. Keep up the great work. Until next time, Thompson out.